Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Reviewing Comics with me, your host, Alexander Turbin. Today we're going to be going over Empire Lanes number 4 from Northern Light Publishing. But before we get into that, I'd like to show you my own work. This is Random Access. This is actually number 24, and it came out this month, or last month rather. And this is a comic that I produced on my own, and it's a 12-page full-size, usually full color. I'm going back to full color, except for the third storyline, I think. And I have backup stories by Christopher Knox and Paul Courtjohn and other artists, and also covers and stuff. And you can get these at patreon.com/Alexander Turbin. You can also check out my stuff at alexanderturbin.com, which has Mutandis and The Forlorn and Cyrene and all kinds of other stuff that I've done in my previous art creating, comic book creating career. And it has the newest Mutandis, which is number 6. And you can check that out, like I said, at alexanderturbin.com, or you can check it out at alexturbin0441 at yahoo.com, which is my email, or alexturbin0441 at Instagram. So Empire Lanes, I've really been looking forward to doing this. It is an inspiration. Well, not really an inspiration, because I didn't know what the story was really about. I think somewhere in my mind I had heard about Empire Lanes before. It came out in 1988, like I said, and actually this came out in 88. So 3, 2, and 1 must have been in 87, 86, 87, because I think it comes out bi-monthly. And it's a precursor, I say, but it has really no, I had no knowledge of Empire Lanes, the storyline, or anything like that. I think I knew something about Dungeons and Dragons characters going to the modern world, and in my comic book, The Forlorn, the same thing happens where these Dungeons and Dragons characters come to our world. They're banished by an evil sorcerer and stuff. And I'll be going through this in more detail. Probably the next video, I might be going through The Forlorn number 1 and maybe number 2 too, because I have 2 of them out, and I have actually 4 or 5 done, and I just have to print them, color and print them. But Empire Lanes is a little bit different because it's basically just the characters from a Dungeons and Dragons fantasy world going to the real world, whereas The Forlorn they're superimposed with when the Dungeons and Dragons characters come to our world, the superheroes of our world actually go to the Dungeons and Dragons world. So it's kind of like a dichotomy of heroism, and our heroes the same in other worlds, and stuff like that. So Empire Lanes, let's get into that. Like I said, I've really been wanting to do this because just going through it, I knew that I enjoyed the art. I knew I liked the art. It's super detailed, super textured, and I knew that I really enjoyed it. And I was really, really, really thinking about getting Empire Lanes number 1, and it just hasn't happened yet. And but if and when I do get Empire Lanes number 1, I will do another review of it, because I really kind of wanted to start from the beginning, because I didn't want any kind of mix up if they didn't give any background information on the characters or a story or anything, which they don't. And so it just kind of jumps into the action, and through reading the book, you kind of can a little bit tell what happened in the previous issues. So let's get into the book, and then like normal, I'll backtrack and talk about the writing and the art. It's created by Peter Gross, who did the story, pencils and inks, and Ellen Kajiwara, who does the backgrounds and inks. So backgrounds are fantastic. She does a great job. Peter Gross went on to do Books of Magic and Lucifer for Vertigo, and those are actually two books that I have, and I'll eventually review those too, because I have all of the Sandman tie-in stuff for Vertigo and DC. And also the TV show Lucifer was really pretty cool too, although that's not really the same as the comics. So if you guys have Empire Lanes, or you've read it, or whatever, what you think of it, let me know, because I'm always looking to hear from you guys. I love hearing your feedback of the books and stuff. So like I said, let's get into the story of it actually. This is number 4. The story is called Faith, and it's really just kind of people talking in the background about kind of what happened, and they're just kind of talking about because there was some sort of a gang fight with some of these Dungeons and Dragons characters, and they're really just kind of going back and forth. The dialogue reminds me a lot of Do the Right Thing or something like that from Spike Lee. I don't know if Peter Gross was inspired by Do the Right Thing. I can't remember if I'm pretty sure it came out before that. But it's just inner city kind of jive talking. I'd say jive talking, that's dumb. But they're just kind of talking about what happened. Apparently, this group took on the Blades, which is a gang of some sort, and they whooped them pretty bad. And they're just like discussing some of the ins and outs of what happened, what could have happened, and stuff like that. So it's really kind of, I mean, it's dialogue and they're characters, but you kind of know that they're not main characters. They're just kind of side city characters, kind of like oh, what's his name? That's always in the Daredevil stuff. Turk. Turk is always in the background of Daredevil stories, and he's always talking to the other villains, other kind of bad guys or whatever, the street thugs, and it just kind of it adds a little bit of authenticity to the book and the story. So then it goes to, this is a very nice way of doing it. It pans up to the top of this building, and on top of the building is this character who is talking to his Lord. If you just jump in, you might think it's a Christianity kind of thing, but then you kind of realize that the symbolism is wrong, and he doesn't really talk like a Christian. He just kind of talks like a holy person. But whenever I've played Dungeons and Dragons, I've always either been a paladin or a cleric. So I automatically knew that he was a cleric, and he was just kind of going on and talking to his Lord. There's a cleric, and one of my characters is a cleric, Cyrene the cleric. She is not quite as she's as devout, but not quite as heretic. This guy is pretty heretic, and I think that when you play as a cleric in Dungeons and Dragons, and whenever I played, I got extra kind of credit or whatever for really playing up the heretical kind of part of the character, and I think that translated onto the page and what this guy was doing, because obviously the creator Peter Gross has played a bunch of Dungeons and Dragons, and he just wanted to make a cool comic book with Dungeons and Dragons characters, which is very cool. So he takes all of these stereotypes, all of these archetypes, and puts them together and kind of makes them his own. And this very heretic type of cleric, he just kind of is having a crisis of faith, and he's like, what's going on, Lord? Why have you forsaken me? Kind of stuff like that. And then it switches to the dwarf, and there's actually a dwarf in the Forlorn that I have, and it's very interesting to see how this comic is different from my comic, because in the Forlorn, it's not nearly as much dialogue. It's a little bit more actiony, and the characters are a little bit more, I don't know, they're just a little different. If anybody's read any of the Forlorns or whatever, maybe you can explain how it's a little different to if you've read Empire Lanes. But there's a whole ton of dialogue between this dwarf and apparently this magician. The magician doesn't ever say anything. He's a mage, sorcerer, or whatever. He just kind of looks at whatever the dwarf is doing, and the dwarf is just kind of rambling on about whatever and stuff. And he's flipping this light off and on and off and on, and he's like, "Hey, this magic," and he's like saying, "No sense of humor from a wizard." And so I guess above this, Empire Lanes is actually the bowling alley where they were teleported to. A little bit of the backstory of what I've gathered, I read a little bit online, is you have these Dungeons and Dragons characters, and they're trapped in some sort of a cave or something, and they're trying to get out. And the only way that they can get out, apparently one of them has like a magical ruby or something that They don't want their uncle to get the bad guy, the bad villain. So they use this portal. I think it's like in somebody's bag or something like that. And they go through the portal, and the portal ends up at Empire Lanes, a bowling alley. So very similar to what my story is. But then there's some sort of rock or whatever. And so there's these hooligans, ruffians. I'm not quite sure. This guy looks like the milkman there. I can't remember what his name is. But they're supposed to move these rocks back and forth from somewhere or whatever. I think it's dwarven stone, and it has some sort of special meaning to the dwarf. And I'm not entirely sure what this whole thing is. It's supposed to be like a little bit of a gag or whatever. The dwarf fires these guys, and I guess they had given them some gold earlier, and these guys wanted real money instead of gold, and the dwarf just says, "Get out of here," before he smash your heads in and stuff like that. And so they kind of do, and the dwarf has these longings for the dwarven stone, which he intends to make stuff out of, or he covets it or whatever. I'm not entirely sure what that's supposed to mean. I mean, I know it has the meaning of dwarves loving to dig and to create and stonework and stuff like that, but I'm not sure where that would really fit into the greater story. A lot of the dialogue, I'm not entirely sure. It's like a long exposition. It's got a lot of stuff that they're saying, and I'm not really sure it truly gets to the point, but we'll talk about that when we talk about the writing. But then it zooms to another part of the characters, because there's 5 or 6 of the characters. There's a dwarf, there's a magician, there's a fighter, there's a thief slash hobbit. There's I don't know, princess. Is she a princess? And I think there might be one other character. I'm not sure. Apparently somebody came back to fight them in issue 2 or 3, and it was some sort of wizard, dark wizard, woman wizard, and she fought the knight and turned him into a her. So they kind of talk about what's going on there, and how he chopped her head off, and he defeated the wizard without any kind of extra strength, because he's really upset that he got turned into a woman. So that's kind of an interesting aspect of the whole book and the whole story. And it really, the dialogue comes together, and you kind of learn a little bit about the story and stuff. But he's depressed, and the princess or whatever gets him slash her to finally smile or whatever. And then we go back to the mage, and the mage is kind of clicking the light off and on and off and on, and he's having this memory thing. I think I'm not entirely sure of when he got his first staff and some of his magical stuff. He was given his magical stuff by, I don't know, maybe he was an apprentice to another wizard or whatever, and so he's just kind of remembering what was happening with this with him back when he was little and stuff. And so that's really just a little bit of a flashback, not too much. It doesn't show how he became a wizard or anything like that. It just kind of, somebody gave him some wizard stuff, and that's how he became. So then it zooms back to the cleric, and he's on the street, and he's on the main street or whatever, and he's trying to collect some followers, because that's what the cleric is always trying to do in classic D&D. They're always trying to spread the gospel of their god and their deity or whatever. And he's kind of lost his face, but it kind of, you can never keep a good cleric down. So he's just trying to find people that he can spread the gospel to, and a dog pees on him, and he's like, that's not going to deter me from anything. And eventually he's walking down the street, and he smashes into this guy who opens the door on his face, and that's a little bit of comedic relief or whatever. So, and there's music, so he decides to go into the establishment and try to find pass on his love of his deity or whatever. And then it goes to the Hobbit and whoever this is. I don't know if this is a person in the mortal world or the real world or whatever. I think it is. I don't think she's part of the bigger group. But they're spying on this other a gnome, which he looks kind of big to be a gnome, but he's kind of spying on him, and the gnome is trying to figure out some sort of magical powers or whatever. And so he's given himself some grief, given the magic candle some grief, given whatever. He was fighting the magician, the sorceress, and he grabbed something magical because I think in this world magic maybe doesn't work all that well or whatever. So he's trying his best to get the magic going, and it finally takes a rat to pee on a candle that he was holding him over to get the magic to spark up, and so the magic sparks up. He's all happy. He thinks he's really great. But then it starts to go out of control and he's like, stop it, stop it, stop it. And then there's this big magical vortex outside of the Empire Lanes. And it's apparently, I don't know, some character that I don't know who it is. This is 4. And there's actually only 4 issues. As far as I know, I think it says to be continued, but I don't think there's a 4th issue. I've seen on eBay that it is. I've only seen the 4 issues. I think there's actually a novel that he wrote and completed, so maybe he continues it there. So that's as far as I got. There's some pinups of some characters that they just say is kind of filler. So maybe these are characters that they were thinking about using, or they were going to. I don't know. But so yeah, that kind of is just how it ends, which is very weird and not very fulfilling, because if this is the end, then I might have to, I don't know, go buy the book or something. So let's talk about the writing. He went on to, it said, he wrote Lucifer and Books of Magic, but I think he drew either most of it, some of it, or something like that. His style reminds me of Barry Windsor Smith, a cross between Barry Windsor Smith and Guy Davis. And it's really kind of a cross between a cartoony style and a little bit more of a realistic style. Probably the realistic style is all of this intricate detail of the backgrounds and the characters and stuff, and the texture. The first thing that you notice when you go through this book is the amount of detail and the amount of textures. Everything has a little bit of texture. Even the sky here, I'm not entirely sure how they got that texture, whether it was Zipatone, Duoshade, or I don't know. It almost looks like it was done with some sort of copy machine type of filter or something like that. But then you have this intricate line work and this awesome black shading and shadows. So this whole thing has some really fantastic textures, fantastic line work. I mean, it's beautiful. I don't know how it was done, how it was inked. I think it looks like it was done by a nib and not a brush. But look at all these intricate line work and stuff, and the texture on the forehead and the whole just the lighting. It's really, really beautifully done. And it's not just texture everywhere. It's not like Barry Blair, who does his airbrush and it all looks the same. This is all different types of texture, where you have really good darks, shadows where it's really dark, and you have really white lights where it's his arm and stuff like that. And the textures are all completely different. The texture of his folds in his cloak is completely different than the texture of the wood grain. And this is some really nice wood grain that he's done here, and it looks completely different than my wood grain. I have a little bit more of a I don't know, just different type of wood grain, but this really does the job. And it's like, look at the ceiling. It's maybe some dry brush and some stippling. I think it's a combination of dry brush and stippling and just different line works that he's used. But really, just this massive amount of textures and everything. But also, it's not just the textures and the backgrounds and stuff like that, because apparently the backgrounds are done by this Eileen Kajiwara, which is fantastic. I mean, her backgrounds are beautiful. I'm going to have to look her up and see if she did any other comic book work. But also the characters. The characters are fantastic. They interact with each other really nicely. They've got real nice movement and emotion. You can tell really, I mean, this brooding dwarf is looking at the stone, and you don't need this and all of this stuff to tell that that's what he's doing. He's just kind of, his shoulders are kind of haunched, and he's got his bat down to his side, and it's really it's got a lot of emotion and feelings in the whole thing. One of the really great things that I noticed, particularly in this, I love the use of negative and positive space here. This is fantastic. This is something you would see from a Frank Miller comic or something like that, from Daredevil or whatever. This where it breaks out of the page, breaks out of the panel, and he uses different types of panel sizes and stuff, which is really great. I like the narrative art. I never had to backtrack and reread anything. And usually I like less panels per page, but this guy really does a fantastic job of organizing the panels so that even if it is a little bit more, you get the action and you get the story all interconnected, and you know exactly what's going on, and it's actiony and eventful and at the same time. So you kind of really know exactly what's going on. One of the really great things also, did Will Eisner do this kind of stuff where you have the shattered glass of the window, and in between the windows is the lettering, and that's like an interaction of the it's like you've pulled back, you see into the window, but you can only see what's through these broken panes, and you see inside. It's kind of like when in a movie, when somebody is listening to music in their car, and then they stop the car and they open the door and the music stops. It's like an interaction. It's an interaction between the reader and the story and the artist and the creator, which is really fantastic stuff going on here. And this whole texture and stuff in this flashback scene. Look at this crazy texture stuff. Each of these pages must have taken so long. I don't know whether this is stippling. I think it's a combination of cross hatching and then some stippling. So I'm not entirely sure that that's really needed, though. So much of this stuff, so much of this texture and stuff, is it really needed to tell the story effectively, and is it worth it? That's I'm definitely going to go into that with different art styles and different artists and stuff, is how much detail is really needed to tell the story, and does it change the story? Does it change how you feel about the story and stuff like that? That's definitely something that I'm gonna super delve into, because that is a really a big topic for me right now, especially right now, because I've been told a little bit now that I need a little bit more detail in my work, which I kind of I appreciate the constructive feedback, and I'm definitely mulling it over and seeing if I should change things. But he also has this cartoony look, like this Hobbit guy, and his eyes super cartoony. So it's not like intricate detail and it's realistic and everything like that, because it's got this combination of cartoony style along with this huge detail stuff going on. So it's a great intertwining of two really strange different styles, which I don't know how much of the backgrounds were done by Eileen and how much were done by Peter. Who knows? If anybody has any kind of clue, if there's like an interview with them or whatever, please let me know, because I would really like to know who does what in this comic, because it just says her backgrounds and inks, but what did she actually do? Did she draw all this and ink it, all the backgrounds, and did she do all of the texture over it, overlays and stuff like that, or did he pencil all of that stuff in and she just inked it? I would love to know. So if anybody has any kind of inkling, please let us know. So yeah, I mean, look, it's the amount of detail and the amount of textures and everything. It's just insane. It's just insane. And I hope they made enough money to make it worth their while. As for the writing and the story is really good. It moves at a really nice pace. Being issue 4, it didn't tell you what happened in the previous issues, which I really don't like. But at the same time, through the story, it kind of relates back to what happened in previous issues, and I do like that. So even though I was a little bit confused at the beginning, as I went on, it's like almost like piecing together a puzzle and what previously happened, and the puzzle just comes together and it becomes this really nice cohesive story. The only problem I have is that the dialogue is a little bit too intricate. It's almost too intricate. They do each have their own voices, their own dialect and their own way of talking and stuff like that, and that's really great. But it's almost too much. It's almost too intricate. It's almost too much detail in the dialogue, because it almost bogs things down a little bit. And especially these characters that are superfluous and they don't really mean a whole lot. I don't think they mean a whole lot, and they just kind of go on a little bit too much. I would much rather have, I don't know, maybe some kind of action scene and have these pages cut down to, 2 or 3 pages instead of this 4 pages, maybe 2 pages. I think I would have enjoyed this little intersection here into 2 pages and added some other stuff. As for this conversation, all of the conversations are very meaningful and enjoyable to read, but again, it's a little bit too intricate. Maybe I'm just lazy, but it's enjoyable to read, but it's a little bit too much at the same time, mainly because they don't resolve anything in their discussions with each other. But it says it's to be continued, so maybe you have to read everything and then eventually read the book, I guess. But I did enjoy the writing, and I super enjoyed the art. The art is actually very beautiful. And yes, so Empire Lanes number 4 review. I did really enjoy the story. It harkens me back to The Forlorn, so I have that special attachment to it. But at the same time, the characters felt a little bit disjointed, and even though they were interacting quite nicely, it almost felt like there wasn't any kind of resolution when they were done talking in their little scope of whatever they were talking about. And maybe that's just because you have to read the whole thing. It's like a manga. You just have to read, all 5,000 pages of it to understand what's going on. But I did enjoy reading it, but I didn't love it. So the art carries it. The art is beautiful. I could just look at this all day long. It's just fantastic looking. And I'm going to try to put some of this kind of stuff into my own artwork. I think that would really help it a lot, actually, with the texture and stuff. Texture, you can never get enough too much texture in a comic book. It just adds so much atmosphere and so much entertainment to the page, actually. So I really love the art. I would probably give the art a 9 all by itself. And I mean, I would give the writing a 7. I'm going to give it 7. I don't really remember their names. I don't really care all that much about what's going on with them. It's a little bit too much. If they had narrow down a little bit of the dialogue, I think that would have been a little bit better, and I think I might have enjoyed it a little bit more. As for the whole thing overall, I'm going to give it an 8.5. I'm going to get an 8.5. The art carries it. The story drags it down a little bit, and the fact that it doesn't end. There's, as far as I know, there's only 4 issues, and then it continues on to something else. And am I ever going to read that something else? I doubt it. If I ever see it, No, I'm never going to. If I see an Empire Lanes book, I'm not going to buy it and read it. But will I get issues 1 through 3? Yes, I would. Yes, I totally would, and I will. I'm looking for them on eBay right now, which I like to tell you guys the prices of them. They're like $2, $3 for Empire Lanes 1 through 3, 1 through 4, 2, 3, 4, $5. Not even $5, $2, 3, $4. So they're really super cheap. They're easy to grab, and I would say they're truly worth it. It reminds me a little bit of Warlock 5, in the way that the art is super great and the writing is a little bit lacking. But the writing is much better in this than in Warlock 5, I do believe. And it's just a well put together color comic, and the cover is really nice. And so yeah, I enjoyed it. I'm giving it an 8.5. If anybody's read any Empire Lanes, let me know what your thoughts on it are. And if you have any idea about the background, what each of the artists did, anything like that, please let me know. I'd really love to hear about it in the comment section. Again, if you're new to the channel, I review older 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s indie comics that nobody else really wants to talk about, but I really love them, so I'm going to talk about them. So, yeah, if you like that kind of stuff, please consider subscribing and hitting the notification, and also leaving me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this kind of content. So, Empire Lanes 8.5. Thanks for watching, and have a great day, and keep on creating.